Hello, 6th grade math instructors. Today, I'm telling you guys about backwards design. Wanted to show you this process because this, I think, is going to be one of the better things for us to help get our scores up as we take our state exams and such. So deal with it a little bit. I understand, and you all know me as I've been a biology teacher for a long time, so I'm using one of your TEKS or two of them to help make this video. I understand that you probably are going to have a much more intensive background in your understanding of it. So I'm going to show you the process though, and then we're going to discuss it throughout the day of what I'm going to expect to see, how I expect to see your lesson plans afterwards within the next few weeks so that I can see how you are using backwards design in your classroom and how it is being productive or not, so that we can discuss it further and how we can make it a good experience instead of a bad one. So let's get down to it. What is backwards design? Well, backwards design is a process where instead of starting with your TEKS and then going on to your lesson plans, you're going to start with your TEKS, with what you already do, to show what content you're planning on teaching on the coming grading period. So a lot of you might go, well, I already do that. I pick which one. So we're not reinventing the wheel completely here. So you already do this. You already use your TEKS and you already focus in on them, on how can we instruct these students. But we're missing a point when we aren't designing the assessments first based on these TEKS. So instead of making our lesson plans of this and then making our tests on our lesson plans, we need to start with the assessments after we've done a good analysis of our TEKS. Okay, so next we're going to design the actual assessments that'll cover the content, and then we're going to design the lesson plan to cover the assessment. So we're kind of making a scaffold that we're going to build upon to help these students better learn your content, and again, to get our scores a little higher than we had last year. So the last thing we want to do after we've got those lesson plans is now we're going to formulate our formative assessments to show where our students are throughout the entire process of your lesson plans. So first, let's look at your TEKS. What TEKS to cover? I picked 4A, which is a readiness standard. It's to compare two rules verbally, numerically, graphically, and symbolically in the form of y equals a times x or y equals x plus a in order to differentiate between additive and multiplicative relationships. That's a readiness standard. And then we have 4B, which is a supporting standard of apply qualitative and quantitative reasoning to solve prediction and comparison of real-world problems involving ratios and rates. So when we look at this, now we want to break down our TEKS. So the first thing we do, as we always discuss, we want to look at our verbs that we're going to look at, and then how are we going to support these verbs and breaking it down. So we're looking at two rules in the form of these two equations: verbally, numerically, graphically, and symbolically. Okay, so there's four different ways that they need to be able to compare these two different rules in order to differentiate between additive and multiplicative relationships. So that right there sorry, we'll get to that in a second. That right there kind of gives us an idea as we break down looking at the verb, what the verb means. We're comparing two different things versus the other one. We have apply, which is a little more of a higher level verb that we're going to be focusing in on. Okay, so first, to support our 4A, to support this one, I'm using the wrong color. To support this standard down here, we are going to want to design questions based on using graphs, which represent an understanding of y equals a times x or y equals x plus a. We also are, of course, that's one of these. So we check that one off. We're going to want to also design questions based on using verbally, how to explain it; numerically, then they will crunch the numbers; and symbolically, how they might show that being used as well. So all of this, we want to design these questions on there. And again, we're just comparing and contrasting in a sense. So we want to use that level, but our supporting standard is a little higher thinking. So in this, with the apply, we want to try to embrace critical thinking skills so that they can look at a situation in the real world and actually use that information to find their solution. And in my experience, my best thing that I've always seen is it's always needing some form. It's not just a multiple choice question or a matching that I've seen. It is a situation that they usually need to write an essay out. They need to explain how they're using it so I can see the appropriate way. I don't want them to just act. It's a question that they can't Google. That's the answer. That's how I always was taught it. Is if it's Googleable, it's not a good essay question that's using critical thinking skills. They're not applying it if they can easily Google the answer. So you need to produce a question base on your assessments that are going to engage them in that thought process so that they can use their critical thinking skills. So that is our TEKS that we're going to cover. This is our assessments that we're going to cover. So what are we going to do next? So we've got our TEKS, we've got our assessments, but now I need to do my lesson plan. And my lesson plan is going to have to, this is where I sit down and make the game plan. This is where I'm going to go, all right, I know what I'm expecting my students to do. I know the TEKS they need to know for this 6-week period. I know the assessment that I am going to use because I spent my time and developed it. So now how am I going to teach this content to them so that they can understand it and pass that test? That's the end goal, right? When they pass the test, that shows that they've mastered the content. So that's what we're trying to do. So first, a lot of you have already been doing your 6. Like I said, you already know your TEKS. You already probably have lesson plans. We're just switching a couple things around. Bring out your old lesson plans. Look at your old lesson plans. If you've got a lesson plan that's going to hit everything on that assessment, go for it. Use it. Don't reinvent the wheel. But a lot of you might look at it and go, I could add something to this right here, or this area on this side, it's really just kind of extra, and I can remove that and spend more time in this harder concept that these students are going to get tested on. So now I'm allowing you've now gotten the opportunity to realize what your end goal is, and you get to revamp what you've already done. Now, if some of you might hit a point where you go, I got to scrap this whole lesson plan and make a new one. That happens. We've got to do that. We got to make sure that we're doing the best we can for these students. And that's kind of where that's going to go with. All right. So we start with our TEKS, we go to our assessments, and then we develop our lesson plans. And then last, we're going to make sure we have our formative assessments. And I'm going to talk about that with my example that I provide. So this is a website that I use often in biology. They had a lot of good projects for me. I found quite a few on 6th grade math. They have a lot of different sciences, kind of your STEM section of materials that you have. You can actually use this. It's a free resource, Texas A&M Agri Life Extension. That is not what I selected. I would highly recommend this website right here. You should research it, check it out. They have a lot of good content, okay? So right here, this lesson plan, it is using the TEKS that I told you that I was going to use. It's got a couple more. So I would want to reteach those, make sure I go through those. It goes through our basic idea of what we have. It even talks about our evaluation that we're going to need. It has our different activities. We want to try to engage them in these activities. We don't want this to be a lecture-based classroom like we all know. We want to have as many activities, as many small group settings where the students have control of their content as possible, okay? So this right here was a project that I found where the students have to measure their homes, and they're going to use the content on 4A and 4B big time in trying to develop what their measurements of their house are, and they're going to start making these angles and everything, okay? So it's a great hands-on task, as we can see here. You can get the parents' help to involve. They can do some good work at the house, make sure they're going to measure the length and widths and the heights of everything. So it's this is an idea of a plan that I really liked when I was doing my research to see, and we can have that there. Now there's my lesson plan. the formative assessments. I'm a big fan, you all know I'm a big fan of bell ringers and exit tickets. It's great to begin the class where the students are thinking. It's great to end class with the students thinking. So in that exit ticket, bell ringers, a lot of times we try to just do a quick formative assessment of like a 5-question quiz or something, just to move and get the brain turning. A lot of times we can try to engage them in other, hey, like explain what your project that you did at the house kind of bell ringer, get them going. But your exit tickets, they need to conclude the material of the day and continue the information for tomorrow. So when they walk into class the next day and do their bell ringer, they already know what they're doing. So that exit ticket, you can start to formulate it now with this design so that they actually are more engaged in your content before class, during class, and after class, because you took the time to make an exit ticket where now the students are thinking about that when they leave. Not just, I ended the class and now I can move on. So again, this is kind of backwards design. Some of the stuff you already do, you might feel like, hey, I don't really have to change much. If that's the case, that's great. I want to see it though. I need to see that you can produce these results that we're looking. I need to see that your assessments are aligned with your TEKS. I need to see that your lesson plans are aligned with your assessments. I have to see that. Okay, so we're going to be going through that the next couple of days. Just kind of look at it, go through a couple lesson plans together. If you need any help, any questions, something you don't completely understand, we're going to start discussing it in the next 5 minutes. Okay, thank you for your time.